Hey, podcast friends. This is Dr. Steve Hewlett with the podcast, Simple Healthy Choices for Weight Loss, where every week we help people who have realized that as their health has been declining over the years, the number of medications they are being prescribed is increasing. We want to help you reverse this health path so you can live the vibrant, pain-free, and hopefully medication-free life you deserve to live. If you'd like even more information on this topic, you can go to Amazon or Audible and pick up my book, Your Plate is Your Fate. And if you think my book helps you on your new health path, please tell your friends and leave a review where you purchased it. Welcome back, podcast friends, to another episode of Simple Healthy Choices for Weight Loss. And today we have got an interview with someone I think you guys are really going to love. His name is Robert Sikes. And thank you so much, Robert, for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure. I'm excited to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Now, just to let you know, Robert, this is Robert Orion Sikes, and he's a lifetime natural competitive bodybuilder. He started training as a junior in high school, weighing a whopping 115 pounds. In the beginning, he followed traditional bro dieting wisdom, which consisted of eating 6 or 7 meals a day filled with carbohydrates and very high protein. This nutritional protocol led to a downward spiral of health issues and disordered eating. After his third bodybuilding competition, Robert decided to try something new and began experimenting with a high-fat, strict ketogenic approach to bodybuilding. He formulated his own approach to contest prep nutrition, leveraging keto, and earned his pro status with bodybuilding in 2017. He has since dedicated his life to learning and teaching others the benefits of following a well-formulated ketogenic lifestyle. The lessons learned led to his creation of the Keto Brick, a 1,000-calorie ketogenic performance meal. The brick was never meant to be a product sold to the public. Robert just created it for his own personal use during his competition prep. However, after featuring it on YouTube video, he received a ton of interest around the brick and decided to jump in with both feet to make it into a viable business. After countless late nights and never-ending grind, the business took off, and he has since become a wild success. Robert now works alongside with his wife, Crystal, and their amazing team to continually create content and keto bricks and add a ton of value with his community. His mission is and will continue to be empowering others to believe in themselves and truly tap into their full potential by optimizing their body and mind. That is an awesome story. I can't wait to dive into this with you. I don't think a lot of our listeners are actually bodybuilders. There may be, and I know there are some who are actually talking about wanting to build more and start getting shredded. So I think we've got a lot of game we can talk about here. So the first
I would argue everybody listening is a bodybuilder. You know, if you build the body up properly or improperly.
Yeah, that's true. That's totally right. Healthy or unhealthy.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you had a downward spiral of health issues and disordered eating before you switched over. Like, what kind of health issues did you have?
Yeah. So for my first competition, you read in the bio that I was 115 pounds to start. So I bulked up to 30 pounds at the height of my weight before I did my first competition. This was when I was a sophomore in college. And then I lost 80 pounds for that first competition in 12 weeks. So I lost 80 pounds in 12 weeks, lost a ton of muscle in the process. And I was just doing everything incorrectly from a dietary standpoint. I was not consuming ample calories, not consuming ample nutrition on any front, overdoing the cardio, overtraining, just not sleeping. Everything was improperly done. And I got really lean. I won the competition, but then once the show was over and there was the finish line was crossed, so to speak, I just totally went off the rails. I was binging on food, purging on food, and that just became kind of a vicious negative cycle that lasted for several years thereafter. And, you know, the whole binging, purging relationship with food that a lot of people are plagued with, that is much more common than people realize. So I wanted to kind of bring some light to that. And then as far as what I found to really help counter that, you know, the ketogenic diet was my stepping stone to break free of that negative cycle.
So had you found that diet like online, or had you met other bodybuilders that were trying that way, or how did you get to that?
Yeah, so I started doing keto back in 2015, which was before keto was popular like it is now. There wasn't really any books or podcasts about the subject. So I started doing something called carbohydrate backloading, which was developed by John Kiefer. And basically it's keto during the day and then a bunch of high glycemic index carbs at night. And I liked that because it kind of gave me permission to binge on the foods. Like I would literally go to bed eating like a whole Betty Crocker tray full of brownies covered in peanut butter and syrup. Like it was just not good, but that's what the backloading diet called for. But then I realized that I felt better without those carbs. So I basically was doing carb backloading minus the carbs, which lo and behold was pretty much keto. And then I think my first introduction to the term keto was through a Tim Ferriss podcast. I believe he had Dr. Dominic D'Agostino on the show, and they were talking about a ketogenic diet. And this was all new to me, but it resonated with me because this is pretty much what I was doing in my own day to day. And I just decided to double down on it. And nobody else in the bodybuilding space that I was aware of was doing keto. Everybody in the gym that I trained at was saying that it was not possible, that I couldn't possibly build muscle or lose body fat without carbohydrates. I wouldn't have energy. I wouldn't be able to excel in the sport. But I decided, it was worth my relationship with food improving, if nothing else. So I did that. And then lo and behold, decided to compete with that protocol as well. And then I'd gotten better than I'd ever had with that approach and earned the pro card in 2017. And I've been doing keto ever since I started in 2015 without any regrets whatsoever.
So do you find yourself hungry? Because we never did bodybuilding, but we did a program years ago called Body for Life. I don't know if you've heard of it, really old, but you ate 6 times a day and just every couple of hours, and we would just find ourselves hungry. Just couldn't wait for that next meal. Do you feel like you're that way?
Before I started doing keto, when I was doing traditional, carbohydrate-based high protein protocol, I would eat every 2 or 3 hours, and I was just a slave to the clock.
Mm-hmm.
I would literally, I was in college at the time, and I would have a backpack with all my books in there. I'd have a gym bag with all my gym equipment in there, and then I'd have another duffel bag with my Tupperware in there. And I would stop whatever I was doing, whether it was a final exam or whatever it may be, to get my meal in on that 2 or 3 hour mark. And it just wasn't sustainable. It wasn't how life should be lived. I was a slave to the food. And with that approach, I was always hungry. I mean, they say eat several times a day to help ramp up metabolism, but that's not really true. It's not the way the body works. So now, with me being in a competition prep, I'm actually only doing 1 meal a day at the moment. So I'm only eating 1 meal a day. It's a larger meal, but it's 1 meal. And I feel much more satiated. And then granted, I am in a competition prep right now. So when I'm in a building phase, eating more overall calories, I don't feel any hunger whatsoever. But now with my calories dropping quite a bit, I am starting to feel a little bit more hunger, but much less so than I was eating several times throughout the day.
Mm-hmm. That's what we found also when we were doing the Body for Life, and we were eating the same thing every 2-3 hours. We were eating. But like she said, when we ate that way, we were always starving for our next meal. Mm-hmm. But now that we're eating, I pretty much do 1 meal a day. I might put another snack of yogurt or something in there somewhere within the small window, but I never get hungry anymore. And it's so weird because that's what, when you talk to people about doing the time restricted eating and eating the keto or carnivore, that they just can't imagine. They're like, I would die of hypoglycemia and I'd be starving to death all the time. It's like, no. You trust me, you won't be that way. And slowly we've been talking to people because we just kind of got into this whole ketogenic, carnivore, proper healthy eating stuff just about 4 years ago. And so now we've talked to enough people to where they're actually doing it and they're coming back saying, oh my gosh, you're right. I thought I was going to be starving when I started eating this way, just 1 or 2 meals a day. And they say they feel very satiated. Mm-hmm. But I was wondering with bodybuilding, because I have wondered this, because I know that's kind of how the ketogenic and carnivore kind of really can work well, because you've got to make sure that you eat your fat with it. Because if you start getting lean like you are, where your percent body fat goes down, then you really aren't going to have a lot of reserve stores for energy. And is that where, do you tend to eat more fat when you're doing this also, because that is the best source of the energy that you can get?
Correct. So when I was doing a carbohydrate-based protocol, I was not fat adapted. I wasn't metabolizing fat as a primary fuel source. I was using carbohydrates and glucose. And with that, you get a lot more blood sugar dysregulation. You have spikes, you have lows. That's what triggers oftentimes that, fluctuation in hunger and energy levels. Plus, in the traditional prep protocol, when your fat is really, really low, like most competitors take it, I've competed against people that have literally taken fish oil pills out of their diet for fear of the fat from it. And they'll see such a down regulation in their hormonal health that they've lost all libido. They're pretty much just walking around as zombies at that point. It's not healthy, not sustainable. Whereas with me in the ketogenic approach, I keep my dietary fat relatively high throughout the entirety of the prep. even as my calories are dropping, my fat is dropping, but never to an unhealthy range. And my protein, depending on where I'm at in the prep, is always within a healthy range. My carbs are pretty well non-existent, but you don't need carbohydrates for energy once you become fat adapted anyway. So
Exactly.
I'm able to just tap into the dietary fat and my stored body fat as my primary fuel supply. And I feel much better throughout the entirety of it.
So when you say you increase your fat, like what do you eat? What fat are you consuming besides the fat that's in the meat, the obvious fat, good fat that way?
Yeah. So a typical diet for me, like right now, for instance, I'm tracking my macros every single day and everything's weighed out and measured to the T. And this week, for instance, my macros are such that I've got one whole keto brick a day. So that's the product that we produce. It's primarily a cacao butter based product. It's 1,000 calories, 90 grams of fat per brick. And the main source of fat in that is the cacao butter, which is incredibly high in stearic acid. So that's a really good fat source for me. And then along with whatever I'm getting from the meat. So I'm doing relatively high protein at this point in the prep. So I have leaner sources of meat, but still doing ruminant animals. Like I hunt quite a bit. So I'm taking in quite a bit of venison right now from my prior hunting season this past year. I'm doing some salmon. It just kind of depends on what I'm doing, for the macros that week. But I also eat quite a bit of whole eggs. So you're getting some fat from the whole eggs there. But pretty much all animal-based sources. And then that which comes in the keto brick.
Do you do butter?
Yeah, I do some butter. I'm not doing butter this week because of the macros. So not any butter at this particular moment. But yeah, I typically have butter throughout the week on a normal basis for sure.
So how close are you to your competition?
So this will be technically the longest prep I've ever done. So I got my pro card in 2017 and then I did a prep in 2020. And then 1 week before the competition in 2020, COVID canceled the show. So I spent all this time prepping and then it got canceled. With this competitive season, I started prep on April 3rd and my first show is the 2nd of September and my last show is the 18th of November. So pretty much it'll be an all year prep when it's all said and done.
Wow.
A long while.
I bet you look forward to that, huh?
And honestly, I feel great. Like I feel better than I've ever felt in a prep. And I think some of that is because I've just gained more perspective over the years and doing this so many times. I'm more fat adapted than I've ever been because I've been adhering to this diet for so long. And honestly, I've got so much going on in my life outside of the competition, whether it's, business or my son or family, that I haven't had time to just boredomly focus on food and what all I'm sacrificing. I'm just tackling the day to day as it comes.
Yeah, that helps. It helps a lot. So like he was saying earlier, we have the clients that are heavier and not really talking about bodybuilding, but they do, once they start losing weight, they do want to start exercising. And we work out, we lift weights and things, but we just kind of tell them to start walking and then to incorporate weightlifting. But how do you have people like that? I'm sure you do, that come to you and maybe they don't necessarily want to bodybuild, but how do you get them started weightlifting?
Or if they haven't lifted in, 3 decades, we have them like that too. They just, after got out of high school or college, they just quit doing that. They start focusing on everything else. So
anybody, whether they plan on stepping on stage as a competitive athlete or not, would benefit from some form of structured resistance training. I mean, muscle, I've heard it described as the longevity organ. Like if you don't use it, you will lose it. And muscle is one of the most protective organs you can have as you age from a longevity and just sense of well-being standpoint. That's going to make sure your joints are robust. It's going to help with your bone density. That's going to make you less frail as you age. And as you age, your ability to preserve lean tissue becomes increasingly harder from a hormonal standpoint, from an activity standpoint, from a metabolic standpoint. So continuing to weight train, resistance train in some form or fashion is going to help hedge against that. And again, you don't have to do so with the intention of stepping on stage and competing or looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but just simply activating the muscles, activating the joints, forcing blood into that tissue and providing some form of stimulus is going to be key. And yeah, walking is great. 100% recommend that for sure. But just simply moving the body throughout a complete range of motion across all different body parts is going to be key. And any form of structured resistance training routine is going to incorporate that. And it doesn't have to be an extensive routine. I mean, you can simply do, 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week, and get a great workout that stimulates the entire body.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what we talk about. We talk about also as far as the flexibility. The more muscle mass you have, the more mitochondria you have. So the more energy you're burning, the more energy you use. So the more muscle you have, the more leniency you can have with going off your nutrition protocol every now and then for special celebrations, birthdays, holiday, whatever. But it's just, we try to tell them it's just a little meal. That doesn't mean the whole day or the whole week, but the more muscle mass you have, the more lenient your body is as far as that, because you can take that in, burn the calories, and then go right back to fat. Like you were saying, fat adapted, metabolic flexibility. The whole thing is trying to keep your insulin levels low. So you can switch back and forth between the fat and the carbs and just try to keep it more with the fat. And but we just didn't really know, maybe like some good starting resistance stuff that people would try. I know that's a very, very broad.
Yeah.
So I know where you're starting.
I've got several clients that are, older and have not really come from a background of weight training. So I typically start them on just a simple 3-day a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, push, pull, leg style routine. So you've got Monday being all of your pushing movements. So like your chest presses, your tricep push downs, your shoulder, lateral raises and things like that. Your pull day, which is going to be primarily your back and bicep. So any of your pull down movements, or, bicep curls, and then a leg day. So like some form of hamstring and quad development exercise, like a squat, even if it's just a body weight squat, or a leg press or leg extension, hamstring curl, lunges, something of that nature. But a simple push, pull, leg routine done 3 days a week with a handful of exercises for each of those specific body parts would do most people absolute wonders, especially if they're not doing anything at the moment.
Right. So, and then do you also tell them to do the ketogenic diet?
I definitely am an advocate for the ketogenic diets. I'm not naive enough to think that it's a one size fits all and everybody should be doing it. But at the same time, I think everybody should certainly try it to see how they respond to it, and give it an honest, several months so that they actually do reach a level of deep adaptation, so they can get a clearer picture as to how their body does respond to it. Because when you look at carbohydrates, carbohydrates are not an essential macronutrient. Like, you certainly don't have to consume them. The brain does require a certain amount of glucose, but the body is able to provide all of that endogenously through gluconeogenesis. You don't have to consume glucose in order to function at a high level. And for most people that are not competitive athletes, they honestly just don't really earn those carbs, so to speak. Like, carbs can be used as a fast burning fuel source. They don't have to be, but they can be. But if you're not even, expending that much energy through day-to-day training activities, then you certainly don't need those carbohydrates in your system. And if they're not being used, they're more likely to become a hindrance in some form or fashion.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because if you do this, because you hear a lot of the carb loaded and everything, but it's almost like they're thinking that the carbs just hanging around in your bloodstream until you need it. It's like it doesn't. It's going to fill up your glycogen stores, and after those are done and you're using whatever energy at the time, it's going to be converting it all over to fat anyway. So I would think that would have been a weird way to do it, to be eating carbs to bodybuild. So what you're doing makes a lot more sense to me, because it is going to help build muscle and burn the fat without having to actually have all these carbs that you're actually converting into fat and storing it.
Yeah. And carbs, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, as in the bodybuilding realm, carbs are still predominantly used, but I have never experienced a dip in performance in the complete absence of carbohydrates. I don't have any issues lifting heavy, recovering from those heavy lifting sessions. I don't have any issues getting a pump and achieving vascular look on stage. Like, all of these things that people point to as requiring carbohydrates just have not plagued me whatsoever. And I think from a psychological standpoint, so many people have issues moderating carbohydrate intake, because they oftentimes are coming in the forms of hyperpalatable, sugary, sweet foods that tap into people's dopamine, receptors, and they just tend to overeat them. So if you just remove that from the equation entirely because it's not necessary, then oftentimes people have a better chance of, eliminating as opposed to moderating that.
Right. I guess our first experience with this was when we very first started doing the Body for Life, because we did lose weight, and we did get, more in shape. But we went to a bodybuilding contest just to watch one, just to see what it was like. And then we paid the extra because we were going to go backstage afterwards and eat with the competitors and meet them and everything. And we were so surprised when we got back there after this bodybuilding competition. There was just a huge buffet, and there was nothing but carbs. There were carbs everywhere. I thought, I can't believe that these bodybuilders are just sitting there pounding these carbs down after we know what carbs do to you. But they did. That's where my mind kind of is like, okay, what is going on here? So when we found out about you and obviously Danny Vega and
Jamie Seaman.
Yeah.
And now all these bodybuilders that we're starting to meet now that are all on the keto phase, like, it just makes so much more sense to me. It's like that. I can't believe that there aren't more people doing this, for the competition. So that's great.
Well, there's so many, like, eating disorders are more common than not in the bodybuilding space for sure. And for me, like, I want to live a lifestyle that I don't have to escape from or feel like I'm overly sacrificing to do. And for a lot of these bodybuilders that are addicted to carbohydrates, they'll minimize them. And then when the show is over, they just totally go off the rails and they can't contain themselves. That to me is just not a healthy relationship with food in its totality. So for me, the foods that I eat in season and off season are pretty much the same exact foods. Like, I don't ever feel like I'm depriving myself of any of the foods I enjoy eating. I just simply change the quantities of those foods. And those foods, whether I'm in season or off season, are really high quality, nutrient dense food. So I never ever feel guilty about the types of foods that I'm consuming. And I think that lack of guilt associated with my food consumption also helps mitigate against that negative relationship with food.
Yep, that makes perfect sense to me. And I know a lot of people bring up things about fiber too. When you're eating that way, you really got to get your fiber in and all that kind of stuff. And we heard, what you said on your podcast, may have been live.
It was
maybe
live.
when you were live last night. Talking about fiber, and because that comes up all the time too. It's like, okay, don't go down that road. It's like a lot of people think that, you have to have fiber. It's like, well, yeah. If you eat nothing but this ultra processed food that doesn't have hardly any fiber, any nutrients, anything good, period, in it, you are going to have to do something for your gut health. But if you're eating a good, healthy animal meat with a healthy animal fat, it's going to stay in your intestines for much longer. That's part of why you can go, once a day without eating, because you already satisfy your satiety just by eating meat and fat, and stay away from all these stupid, drugs and everything they're trying to push on you, the old Ozempic and all this stuff, and all it does is keep food in your stomach longer. It's like, well, so does fat and so does meat, protein. Just eat that stuff. And I hadn't thought about the fiber issue until you brought that up. I thought that makes perfect sense why it's not that big a deal when you're eating real food.
And from a gastrointestinal standpoint, like everybody that I know that consumes a standard American diet or one that contains a pretty high degree of fiber, they're oftentimes plagued with more GI distress, more bloating, more gas, more bathroom trips. Like, the people that I talk to that are following a quality, well-formulated ketogenic carnivore diet, they're typically going to the bathroom once a day. It's regular, it's normal, it's as it should be. And they just have much more gut health. I mean, that to me, like, the proof's in the pudding, so to speak.
Right.
Oh yeah, but that, so to speak. Unless there's something else, I wouldn't mind talking about another thing that came up on your live last night, which that was very good. We enjoyed that. Thank you. But was your son Rigel, who's 14 months old. Is that right? 14
I believe he's about 14 months now. Yeah.
Okay.
We get this question a lot because when I give my talks on nutrition to people, that's one of the things I talk about is how horrible our processed baby food is that, comes from a drug manufacturer, just like everything else does. And how they're trying to tell people that this is healthier than breast milk. This is the healthy way to do it, which we know is wrong. And baby food is loaded with all this horrible high fructose corn syrup, vegetable and seed oils. They put the milk sugar in, but they take the milk fat out. I mean, everything you can do wrong is what's in this, which is why we have this, epidemic of obese 6 months old now. So I'm trying to tell people, please quit using that. Use real food like we used to, before all these drug manufacturers came out with all this other baby food. But I really didn't have any basis on how to do that because our children, we did not raise our kids that way because we didn't know about all this stuff when they were being raised. Now, like I said, they're 26 and 29 years old now. But you are. And so if you wanted to get into exactly how you guys do this with Rigel and everything, I think we've got a lot of people with children that would love to hear that.
For sure. Let me preface this conversation with a quick little disclaimer here. People are very sensitive to parenting and everybody takes, offense if somebody says, hey, you're doing your parenting wrong. So I just want to say, I'm not saying or suggesting that I'm a better parent or anything like that, but you do the best you can with what you know and what you have available to you at the time. And, I wasn't raised that way either. My folks fed me pretty well, but I remember eating TV dinners and just a bunch of quick, easy stuff, mac and cheese. They didn't know any better either. Crystal and I, we fell into the nutrition space long before we were ever pregnant. So her and I had both been following a ketogenic diet for 7-8 years prior to even, conceiving Rigel. So from an epigenetic standpoint, he was, the egg was fertilized with quality nutrition at the gate, right at the gate, which I'm super proud of there. And then throughout her entire pregnancy, she was sticking to a ketogenic diet. And that's another thing that gets a lot of controversy. A lot of people are assuming that if you're pregnant, you need to be consuming more carbohydrates. That's just not accurate at all. Like, she 1000% adhered to a ketogenic diet throughout the entire pregnancy. She hardly was plagued with any types of food aversions. She hardly had any types of morning sickness, very minor stuff. And a lot of that lack of morning sickness was because her blood sugar levels were stable as a result of not leaning into these binging tendencies to eat hyperpalatable foods like many pregnant women do. So that was one thing. Now, on that note, a lot of doctors will suggest that women need to take an oral glucose tolerance test to ensure that they're not going to have gestational diabetes. You can opt out of that, which we did. Crystal did do a CGM for 2 weeks leading up to that to just basically showcase that, hey, look, she is not diabetic. She's able to have stable blood sugar levels. She's just simply not eating the carbohydrates and sugars. So quick little caveat there. But then after Rigel was born, we continued to feed him. He was breastfed. He still is breastfed. So he's getting that in. But all the food that we have now incorporated into his diet is the same foods that we're eating. I mean, he's eating whole eggs. He's eating whole fat yogurt. He's eating ribeye steaks and ground venison and lamb. And he's eating all the same foods that we're eating. So he's growing. He's off the charts. We actually took him to the doctor this past Monday. He's in like the 99th percentile for height, age, head circumference, all that stuff, weight. So he's clearly growing just as he should, if not better than he should. The doctor was incredibly impressed with his results thus far and kept asking what it is that we were doing. And we just kept illustrating that we're eating as a human being should eat. And I think that opened his eyes a little bit to what's possible, all done without carbohydrates. So no need for the baby food formula fed nonsense.
Right. And I know Crystal also went into the iron. You know how everybody's talking about how you got to give your babies iron. It's like, well, if you're feeding them real red meat, you're already getting the iron in the exact form it needs to be. It's easily absorbable and your iron levels are fine. And that's what you guys found also, right? When they measured his iron just by eating this way, he's perfectly fine on that as well. All right.
Yeah, I mean, supplementation requirements are so minimal when you're eating quality foods. Like, supplements are supplemental, like they're there in case there's not the baseline foundational stuff that should be there at the onset. But if you're eating a quality species appropriate diet, as we are, then the need for supplementation is significantly lower.
Oh, definitely. And I know a lot of people, because again, in this space, it's a real good mix of ketogenic and carnivore. And I think they really all think pretty close to the same, unless people, actually have issues with the fruits and vegetables. But I know a lot of the carnivores are even talking about, because you think that you need to eat even fruits and vegetables. And I'm not against fruits and vegetables. I'm against anything God made. God made meat, God made fruits, God made vegetables. That I'm not against that unless you have issues with it. It's all the ultra processed food I'm wanting to stay away from. But a lot of people think that you have to actually eat fruits and vegetables to get all the vitamins and minerals you need. But what they're finding, you're getting that just by eating real animal meat with the meat and the fat. You're getting all the vitamins and minerals that you need too, plus the right spectrum of amino acids.
Right.
Is that what you're finding as well?
Yeah, it's kind of comical. If you look at like a side-by-side comparison of beef liver or a whole egg, for instance, compared to that of one of the hailed superfoods like kale or acai berry or something like that, like the meat totally wipes the floor with it as far as the nutrient profile goes, vitamins, minerals, nutrients, all that stuff. So what is oftentimes marketed as the best thing for you is just paling in comparison to what quality ruminant, grass-fed, grass-finished, organic red meat would offer.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's kind of the same even, because I've been a clinical pharmacist, doctor of pharmacy for the last 30 plus years. But that's another thing that I find. A lot of the studies that are done, they're all done with sick people. Mm-hmm. I mean, very, very few. I mean, when they very first get started, it's with healthy people because they want to make sure that, this doesn't affect healthy people in a negative way. But then once they do that, then they start broadening the amount of people, and it's more the people that they're like focusing their medication on. But they're all sick people. So now when they're doing these studies, you really don't know how a healthy person will respond to this. You just know how a sick person responds to it, which is usually always, bad. I mean, there's all kinds of more adverse effects. And that's why, like you're saying, eating this way, it's amazing, all the nutrients that are in this stuff that unless you go out and look for this information, because this information is everywhere. And I didn't realize that because I was raised in the medical field. You're reading the medical studies and all this kind of stuff all the way up through. And so I didn't focus on the nutrition part. We didn't get in school. Physicians don't get in school. Nobody gets us in school unless you're actively looking for it. And I was amazed about how much information is out there, on all this stuff.
And studies are great. Like I love reading studies. I come from a family of scientists. I love reading studies personally. And it's exciting to read what the up and coming data and research is showing. But that said, I would caution people against simply reading a hand-picked study and then just assuming it's the word of God, because there's so many inaccuracies inherently in these studies. Oftentimes the population size is not a quality representation of the demographic you're looking for. Any study can find anything that wants to illustrate its desired outcome. Some of the funding behind some of these studies is biased. There's just a lot of inaccuracies in studies, in science. Now, does that mean I think we should do away with it? No, not at all. But we have to be aware of the nuance in these studies and honestly just learn to tap into how we're feeling and performing with a given set of our own variables. Like if people just simply learned how to eat real food and then be objective towards how their body is responding to that food, and then only tweak one or two variables at a time so they don't have just so much noise present in the equation, people would be much more empowered as to what is truly bettering their body or causing its decline. And I think once people learn to do that, it's going to point them in the direction of a quality, wholesome, single ingredient, nutrient dense diet similar to that of the ketogenic diet.
Right. And also, along with the nutrition, obviously we talk about water, staying away from all the sugar sweetened beverages and all that, but increasing your water intake, getting good sleep and stress management, being able to handle stress. Is there anything in particular you do for like stress management or anything like that? Or do you?
Stress and sleep is probably my Achilles heel when it comes to health, my personal health. I've definitely gotten better at prioritizing my sleep over the years. Like I used to brag about getting 2 hours of sleep a night. I certainly don't consider that a bragging topic whatsoever. I'll oftentimes get far less than is optimal. I just have so many irons in the fire right now. I'm probably shaving years off my life from lack of sleep. But I 1000% encourage people to prioritize sleep. I've gotten much better with it. I hope to continue to get better with it. There are certainly things that I've done to try and optimize it. Because I'm not getting much sleep quantity, I'm trying to optimize the sleep quality. So I'll, have really good sleep hygiene. I'll make sure that I'm sleeping in a cool room that's got blackout curtains, or I'll wear like an eye mask. I'll wear blue light blocking glasses so that I'm not staring at a screen prior to going to bed. One thing I've been using lately is I'll have a drink like tea, like a nighttime tea with valerian root or something like that. That typically conks me out pretty good. And I will mouth tape. I don't know if you're familiar with mouth taping, but basically I'll do that. I'll just simply tape my mouth shut with some micropore tape. Keeps me quiet so my wife doesn't have to listen to me. And it also just allows me to get a better, more restful sleep because I'm not breathing through my mouth. I'm breathing nasally the entire night.
Right. And that is so huge. And we've just started learning more about that. Also, who was it that we listened to?
He has the breathing book. James Nestor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Read his book. And so we use the strips for your nose, but we haven't done the tape.
Do you like the strips? I haven't tried those.
Yeah.
What kind of strips are they?
Just the
Breathe Right.
The Breathe Right. I get them at Walmart or Amazon. But you have to get the extra strength. Go ahead. Don't get the generic because they don't stay on, but
most things you can get the
at least
generic,
for me.
it's the same thing. But with the Breathe Right strips, we'd wake up and those things would be on our dog and in our bed and in our hair. I mean, they fell off all the time. But the regular Breathe Right stuff,
I will definitely. I've seen a lot of people using those, but I haven't tried them yet, so I'll have to give that a shot.
Yeah,
and I have noticed since we talked about nose breathing that when I wake up in the middle of the night, if I'm laying there, I'll notice that my mouth will be dry, and I've been mouth breathing. So that'll be the first thing I'll do is close my mouth. And I know Theresa wishes I'd do that more during the day too.
Yep. No, I mean, nasally breathing is key. There's just all these little things that people take for granted. Like breathing through your nose, being in line with your circadian rhythm, eating real food, moving more frequently, certain types of light exposure, heat and cold exposure, like all these things that you can subject your body to that used to happen, natively because of the environment that we lived in, that are now just not an option unless you seek it out, are so important.
Right. I totally agree.
So is there one thing, I'm kind of backpedaling just a little bit with your clients that you have, how do you help them stay on track? Keep from falling off the wagon, I guess.
So with my client coaching base, I coordinate with them. I interact with them on a day-to-day basis. So I use Slack as a messaging software. I update their macros every single week via a Google spreadsheet that I use, and then I message them daily on Slack. So accountability and consistency is absolutely paramount when you're trying to reach a specific body composition goal. So I'll give them macros, which I'm changing weekly. They're plugging those macros into a macro tracker, targeting those macros with as much degree of accuracy as they can. And then I'm holding them accountable through day-to-day communication, whether they have questions on how to eat certain foods to hit those macro goals, or training questions, sleep questions, supplement questions, whatever it may be. They've got access to me at all times, and I just kind of hold them accountable in that regard.
So are you changing their macros weekly if they're not losing weight, or what makes do you change everybody's weekly? How does that work?
I'm pretty much changing everybody's weekly because I want to apply a little bit of pressure. Depends what the goal is. Like if they're in a building phase, I'm not going to need to change as aggressively. But if they're in a cutting phase, then I want to basically apply a little bit of pressure every single week to keep the momentum going and force adaptation in the form of fat loss. So a lot of coaches will just simply say, okay, you're eating 2,000 calories now. Let's drop that down to 1,000 calories and hope you start losing weight. What happens is it's not near as sustainable. It results in some short-term fat loss and weight loss, but then oftentimes they'll hit a plateau, their metabolism will adjust, and it's just not optimal. By gradually manipulating macros on a week-to-week basis, I can make things much more sustainable because rather than losing 1,000 calories in 2 meals overnight, they're reducing it by half a tablespoon or an ounce of ground beef or something very minute that they're not really going to miss that much. And then it just kind of allows adaptations to take place more gradually. They're able to preserve more lean tissue in the process because they're able to continue to train hard because they're not cutting their calories drastically overnight as well.
So do you kind of do it like while they're on their, I may be totally misusing these terms, but while they're in their building phase, you're going to have more of the fat into their macros, and then when they get in the shredding phase towards the end, kind of start decreasing the fat so your body uses your own body fat? Does it go that way or not? That's
kind of. So I've got a pretty specific protocol from a very high level view. Like if they're in a building phase, my main goal is to make sure they're optimizing, building muscle. So to do that, I make sure they're eating at a caloric surplus, which is going to be consuming ample calories, ample protein, and then progressive overload with their training so that they are subjecting their body to more of a stimulus to cause more lean tissue growth. That coupled with ample recovery so they can repair and build more tissue is the 4 main boxes you got to check. In a cutting phase, I'll typically start them out at a relatively high fat ratio, which is going to be designed to optimize fat metabolism at the onset, both dietary fat and stored body fat. I'll start their calories pretty high. And then from there, I'll gradually titrate their protein up and simultaneously drop their fat until I find their own unique protein threshold, because everybody's going to have a point at which they've reached their own unique threshold. And then from there, I'll start dropping both dietary fat and protein. So overall calories are continuing to drop this entire time. I'm just kind of modulating what macronutrient ratio they're working with. And then once they've gotten to a pretty low caloric intake from both fat and protein, carbs are staying low throughout all of this, then I'll start introducing ketogenic caloric refeeds. So basically a strategic refeed that occurs once or twice a week to provide a psychological boost. They're being accustomed to very low intake at this point. So giving them something to look forward to in the form of a refeed there is helpful. But then also that refeed from a physiological standpoint provides a slight boost in metabolic rate. You've got a bolus of fat and protein coming in. You can typically have a better training session the day following a refeed. Plus, from a bodybuilding standpoint, you can use that refeed to showcase a certain look on the following day, which is typically the day of the show. So I'll start incorporating those refeeds and then adjusting calories and macronutrient ratios as needed. And then from there, they've pretty much reached the depth of their cut, the lowest I would feel comfortable taking their calories. And then we transition them into a reverse diet. So we start increasing their calories so that they can return to a more sustainable intake that they can, then transition to a building phase back into.
So when they're done by doing it this way, like you said, with the people who worked out that thought they were supposed to do this with carbs, now that you're teaching these people, after they get done with the competing, do you notice they don't have that ravenous appetite that they're going in there and trying to eat all this stuff? Or is like, no, they feel pretty good and just kind of keep on doing what they're doing and just kind of slowly adjust the calories?
By comparison, they feel much, much better than those that have been consuming much less fat. Their hormones are much more regulated. So that's all a plus. And honestly, like if they don't go and eat a bunch of carbs afterwards, like they can have a pretty significant bolus in fat and protein. Like many of my competitive athletes will go to a Brazilian steakhouse post show, for instance, and eat all you can eat meat. And the negative recourse the following day from that is so much less than it would be had they eaten that same amount of calories from, cakes and sugars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They feel better. They don't have the bloat. They don't have the fluid retention. They feel amazing, actually. So yeah, you can certainly mitigate that downside by just simply continuing to adhere to the quality nutrients that you've been consuming all the while.
Right. Now, you said everybody has their protein threshold. How do you know that? What are you looking at to say, okay, you're at your threshold now, let's start adjusting the miles?
Yeah. So typically when people's protein is getting significantly higher than that of their dietary fat, not necessarily as a percentage of total calories, but as a percentage or as a, gram to gram basis. Once they've reached that threshold, they'll typically see an elevated blood sugar, decreased blood ketones. They'll start to experience more bloat, more brain fog. They just won't feel as optimal. They may notice some more joint pain and inflammation. As I'm increasing their protein and dropping their fat, there's going to be a point at which that person is going to have more of a gluconeogenic effect from that relatively high protein relative to fat intake. So figuring out what that threshold is for the individual, and then from there starting to taper that protein off is the main thing.
So do you have like the ketone mojo?
Yeah. You don't have to do those, but those are pretty insightful. Like for me right now, I am in phase 2, so to speak. So I am increasing my protein and dropping my fat right now throughout the macros this week. And this week, my macros are 135 grams of fat and 205 grams of protein. So still, it's like 59% of my calories are coming from dietary fat. So still the majority coming from fat. But from a gram standpoint, my protein's quite a bit higher. I am nearing my protein threshold now. So I'm probably going to put a CGM in next Monday just so that I can showcase what that data would look like for people following along, because you'll start to see my glucose elevate and my ketones drop as my protein increases much beyond that point.
Okay. Yeah. On your Instagram, I follow you on Instagram, and definitely following your progress, your journey.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to document everything, as transparently as possible, because there's just so much ignorance out there. There's so much confusion out there around how to leverage a ketogenic diet and the complete absence of carbohydrates to optimize body composition and hormonal and metabolic health. And I feel like I feel pretty confident about my protocol. I've been able to, replicate my results with countless clients. And I feel like the more I can do to just make that method transparent to people and give them hope that, hey, look, you can totally do this in a healthy manner without carbohydrates, then that's what I want to do.
It is amazing. I'm so proud of what you're doing. And I really hope that other people are listening and understanding what's going on. It was so weird to me when my son asked me, because he said somebody in the gym had talked to him about what he does is carb load, and then they actually inject insulin. Mm-hmm. And it totally caught me off guard, because I didn't come from that background. I came from what I've learned here about how, the whole thing is keeping your insulin levels low. And here they're actually giving themselves more insulin. I didn't even know how they were actually able to get shredded the way they were. I'm not sure how they were doing that by carb loading and then giving insulin at the same time.
Well, insulin's an extreme growth agent. It's going to cause everything to grow. It's going to cause muscle tissue to grow, fat tissue to grow, cancer cell growth. Like, it's an extreme growth agent. And unfortunately, a lot of bodybuilders that have abused insulin over the past several years have, paid the price and died from it. That and other performance enhancing drugs that they've abused. And for me, like, I've always done natural bodybuilding. I've always competed in natural federations. And I'm never going to be the biggest guy in the world. Like, that, genetically speaking, it's not going to happen. I don't take drugs, so that's not going to happen. I mean, right now I'm 159 pounds. Like, I don't even look like a bodybuilder when I've got clothes on.
And how tall are you?
5'8". So I'm not very tall, not very big, but
you definitely look like it when you don't have your clothes on. I'm pretty shredded pictures of you.
Yeah, that's kind of how natural bodybuilding works. Like, you look like a normal human because you're not taking pro-hormonal levels to get you to, super physiological levels of size. I mean, it's not like, it is not common in our species to be walking around at 300 pounds and 5% body fat. That just doesn't happen. Like, we're not bison. But yeah, I feel like for me, the goal has always been to be as healthy as I can naturally and see how far I can push the envelope in that regard, but to do so with the intention of having and living my best life for many years to come, from a longevity standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Now, what you were talking about and what you're documenting, I'm going back to last night's live. You talked about a new course you're coming out with. Is that it? Is that like what you're doing with your bodybuilding? Is that your course, like a new program?
So I'm working on a course that is specific to ketogenic bodybuilding competition prep specifically. Anybody that's not competing would still benefit from it. Like, the protocol is the same whether you're competing or not. Like, with this course, there are going to be some competition specific insights insight, like, proper tanning and whatnot for the show day. But the overall arching theme for how to manipulate macronutrients and get things dialed in to improve body composition is going to be the same whether you're competing or not. So yeah, this course is something I've been working on for quite some time. It's going to be 200 plus videos. It's a behemoth. It's kind of, it kind of mirrors my book in a lot of ways, a lot of carryover content from the book, but done so with video formats so that people can actually see what it is I'm trying to, illustrate and what to look out for there.
No, that sounds exciting.
And you think that's going to be available by the end of the year, or? Well,
it was supposed to be available January of this year. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger the more I work on it. But I've got goals to get it launched within the next month or two, so much sooner rather than later.
Nice.
Good luck.
Pretty much everything's filmed. It's just mostly a matter of going through some of the edits and compiling all these filmed videos and just getting it uploaded at this point.
Right.
Yeah, we're kind of in the same boat where we've got a program that we wanted to get out before the summer came, and now it's like, well, now let's do it after summer. Now it's like, it's looking like it may be by the end of the year, just prior to the New Year's resolutions or something.
Hey, as long as you get it out there, that's the main.
Yeah, that's what we're thinking. No, don't hurry it. Just try to get a quality product out.
Absolutely.
And then you brought up your book. You have the Ketogenic Bodybuilding.
Yep. Ketogenic Bodybuilding, Natural Athlete's Guide to Competitive Savagery. So that's pretty much a summation of what all I've learned over the years as a natural competitive bodybuilder.
And they can get that anywhere? Amazon? Or
Amazon, ketogenicbodybuilding.com. I've been asked to make it an audible version. So at some point I will sit down and record the audiobook, but I don't know when I'll have time to do that. So don't hold your breath for that one.
I would think that'd be here because I put my book in Audible too, but mine's a different kind of book than yours. I would think yours I'm assuming would have a bunch of photographs, diagrams, things like that. So you're going
it certainly could, depending on how I've never done an audible version before, so I don't really know how I would structure the visuals like that. But just recording, like I sat down to record a chapter one day, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna have to buckle in for this one.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot more in depth than people would think. But just so you know, what you can do on Amazon is just do a PDF and put all your diagrams in this one PDF, and Amazon will allow you to attach that to it. So anybody gets the Audible, they get the attached PDF, and then they can look through it that way.
Nice. Well, I will definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah. And we can talk about it later too if you want to.
Awesome. Thank you.
We touched on it earlier, but there was one thing I missed, and this is back on Rigel again. So he's 14 months old. He is still on breast milk. But then he's also getting real food. Do you guys puree the food, or how do you get it to where he can eat that well? Do you just fork it all into little pieces?
Man, he just eats it. Like we'll cut it up into small pieces, but we haven't pureed anything. Like he'll eat, ribeye steak that we've cut up into small pieces. He'll eat, eggs that we've fried up or scrambled up. I mean, anything that we eat, he eats. It's just, cut up a little bit smaller, but it's not pureed or anything like that. And we let him pretty much feed himself. So the risk of him choking on it's minimized because of that.
Right. And you also let him self-regulate when he's full and when he's not.
Yeah. And he loves the keto bricks. Like he'll chow down on those keto bricks too. So that's nice.
Yeah, we do too.
Do it whole
He has. He's done a whole keto brick.
Has he really? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
He's a little savage himself.
Yeah.
Lucky him. Yeah. And I didn't realize, I know the keto bricks taste fantastic. If you got anybody listening, you need at least order some keto bricks and just see what it's like. They're really, really good.
They are very good.
What I did not know is that you can melt them down.
Yeah. A lot of people do that. A lot of people do that.
So how do they melt them down?
There's a lot of different ways. Some people will do like a double boiler if they want to get fancy. Some people will just stick them in the microwave. If you put them in the microwave, what I would recommend doing is like putting them in there in 20-second increments. Like you don't want to put a brick in the microwave and then put it on there for 2 minutes because then you'll likely scald it. And you don't want to, mess up the tempering of the cacao butter. So if you do like 20 or 30-second increments and then just kind of like, try and chop it up or hit it with a fork or something in between those 20 or 30-second increments, 20-second, 30-second increments, then you'll be good to go. And then it'll melt down. Then you can put it in, silicone molds or ice cube trays or however you want to consume them.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, our microwave broke down about 1.5 years, and we thought, let's just see if we can go without this thing for a while. We haven't missed it. I mean, it's just sitting there taking up space for 1.5 years now. We got a hot air fryer, and that takes care of everything that we do with the microwave pretty much.
Yeah, I don't use the microwave hardly at all anymore. One thing I did get, because I have all my food, prepped in Tupperware with my prep. So I bought this. I was talking to a trucker on my podcast, and he's got this little, it's called the Hot Logic. It's like a little insulated thing with a hot plate on it, and you just plug it into the wall. There's no button or anything. You just simply plug it in. That hot plate gets warm. It's an insulated enclosure, and then it just slowly warms the meal up. So I'll put my Tupperware in there in the morning, and then 2 or 3 hours later, it's hot and ready to go, but it's not subjected to the microwave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
awesome.
because I'm assuming that as you travel, because I'm sure you travel quite a bit, that you're taking all your food. Like you do not eat out. Is that right?
Like when I'm in a prep, I flip a switch. It's 100% go time. I don't deviate at all. No questions asked.
Man.
Now, that is not what I'm encouraging everybody to do. That's certainly not what I'm saying is necessary. That's just what I do when I'm in a competition prep.
Now, our nephew is a truck driver. And so he was telling us about that. I'm pretty sure with those hot logics that he uses those. Yeah.
Yeah, and you plug it right into the lighter, down in the cigarette lighter.
They make a lighter attachment, or they just do like a 110 volt attachment, either one. But yeah, I've been using that every single day, and it works great.
Yeah, I think it's awesome because when there's a will, there's a way. Because people are like, I'm a truck driver. I have to go to the gas, these truck stops to get all the food, and they have terrible food there. But it's like, no. That's what we heard from Jamie. He's like, nope, he takes all his food.
Yeah. And take it, and you can warm it up that way. If you want to go to a truck stop, just take your good food. If you want to warm it up microwave, you don't have one of these things, go to the truck stop and just warm up your own food. You don't have to eat the food that they have there.
I've done that many times. Yeah. There's just no excuses, like if you want something, you make it happen. Like it's really and truly that simple.
Right.
Oh, exactly. Well, is there anything else that you feel passionate about that you'd like to get out to the people that we haven't asked you yet or we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I pretty much covered the full spectrum. I would say, just kind of to touch on reverse dieting a little bit. I feel like a lot of people have a confusion around that. Everybody wants to lose body fat, and oftentimes as a result, the conversation around eating enough food goes unnoticed. So I would just encourage people that have been chronically under eating to, focus on the flip side of that, which is to make sure you're fueling yourself and eating at a surplus from time to time, because that's a lot of benefit comes with that too, kind of the yin yang approach to it all.
Right. And I know when you're bodybuilding, you've been talking a lot about calories and monitoring the calories and everything, and which I totally understand and agree with, except for the people that I'm talking with, or I feel like I'm talking to, or the ones who maybe are already on a lot of medications because of the obesity and type 2 diabetes, or they're getting ready to start, they're considered pre-diabetic and they don't want to go further on the medications. So I'm trying to get them get them off the medications, but I'm trying to tell them to just don't even look at calories. If you really, really can, just get away from the ultra processed food and just eat real meat and real fat, basically. And then if you want to throw in some vegetables and minimal fruits every now and then, that's perfectly fine also. But when you eat that way, your body will regulate the calories. You can't sit there and eat as much meat as you can ultra processed food. I mean, there's just no way. And that's why ultra processed food is made that way. So you continue to eat their product. But so as far as calories, do you think I need to be focusing more on calories when I talk to people, or just say, let your body regulate itself? Kind of like what you're doing.
Yeah. No, if I had to pick between somebody tracking calories, but eating a bunch of processed foods and just trying to get the calories dialed in versus eating intuitively, not focusing on calories, but it all being real quality foods, I would most certainly point people to the latter. Now, you can gain body fat eating a surplus of any type of food, quality food or not. So, I mean, calories, the word calorie had a negative connotation to it amongst many people. I mean, think of calories as fuel. You can overconsume fuel, you can underconsume fuel. It's just fuel. You want to make sure you're consuming quality fuel and consuming an appropriate intake of that fuel. But yeah, if you're simply eating the right foods that are not hyperpalatable, not ultra processed, they're all coming from good quality nutrient dense sources, your body's ability to innately regulate that on an intuitive level is going to be significantly improved.
Right. I agree. Well, I don't know that there's anything else that we haven't talked about. Now, your website is just www.ketosavage.com.
Yep, that's for me. That's where the podcast is. That's where all my content is. Then ketobrick.com for the bricks.
Okay, good. And people, you've got to try these keto bricks. They really, really tasty, and they're filling, and I think you will thoroughly enjoy them like we did. And do.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I can't thank y'all enough. Again, I really, truly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being on here.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate this. And I guess we'll just talk later. And so that's all we have for now. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great week. And remember, make simple, healthy choices to live a quality life. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button below and be sure to tell someone else who may want to change their health path as well. And don't forget, you can also purchase my book, Your Plate is Your Fate, on Amazon or Audible. And if you do, please leave a review.